Hello and welcome to our viewers on PBS in America and around the globe. We start with breaking news this hour because projections in Canada suggest that the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party, will be forming the next government after the country's second general election in 2 years. Now, the poll itself was called by Mr. Trudeau in the hope that his Liberals could win enough of a majority to govern alone, unencumbered by the constraints of a coalition. We don't have an answer to that yet, but his opponent, Erin O'Toole, heads the centre-right Conservatives. This was his first campaign as a party leader. He was very critical of the way Mr. Trudeau handled the pandemic. He had an effective campaign. The BBC's Samira Hussain is live for us in Montreal. Samira, so some of the networks are throwing out their verdict already, but the question as to whether he's back in a minority or got a majority, are we any clearer yet?
Not just yet. I think it's still going to be a few more hours until we get that kind of clarity. I think what a lot of people are going to be looking for is to see whether or not he actually gets that majority. And if he does remain in a minority position, how many seats will he actually have? Now, remember, when he called this election, he had a minority government and he had 157 seats. It will be interesting to see just if he's actually able to gain any more seats. If he doesn't gain any seats, I think a lot of Canadians are going to be asking, well, why is it that they even went to the polls in the first place?
Yeah, it costs a lot of money, doesn't it, having an election like that. Nonetheless, Justin Trudeau would be in a position, presumably, to forge a similar sort of coalition.
It would, in fact, he would be in a very similar position, that he would be dependent on one of the two other minority parties in order to pass any kinds of legislation. It's not exactly what he wanted, and that's not why he called the election. He really wanted to be able to govern freely and govern with that majority. That doesn't look like it's going to be the case, but again, there are still quite a few votes that need to be counted. But the opposition here really did mount a pretty strong campaign against the Prime Minister, calling this nothing but a political ploy to in fact gain more power in Parliament. They also painted him as someone who was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Don't forget that Justin Trudeau comes with a very strong political legacy. His father was a former Prime Minister here in Canada, but that legacy at some moments was also becoming a little bit more of a liability for the Prime Minister.
We've got all the commentators in the background there, Samira, having their two penneth. Have any of the leading Conservative politicians in opposition sort of come forward yet?
No, they have not come forward yet because this is a staggered and there's so many time zones and there's still so many other ballots that need to be counted. I don't think you're going to be hearing anything like that just yet from any of the opposition parties. But the fact that we're seeing that Mr. Trudeau is kind of back in that same position of having to negotiate, there's going to be a lot more discussion, and I think a lot of the minority parties are going to feel a little bit more empowered, realizing that he really needs them in order to get anything passed.
Yeah, not quite the triumphal march that he might have hoped for. Samira, thank you very much indeed for now. Clearly quite some way to go before we get a full picture on the results coming out of Canada.